So, good evening, Mr. Thapa. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. We hope over the next 20 or 30 minutes to ask you a few questions about your life as a journalist, as a political observer, and much else besides. So, I essentially want to take a kind of a two-track journey. I first would like to ask you a little bit about your work as a journalist and so on, followed by your comments on the state of the media today, and maybe some follow-up questions based on your replies. So, to begin with, sir, now you've worked as a journalist for almost 45, 50 years, since the late 1970s, early 80s, and you have all along worked pretty much as a political journalist. So, my first question would be, having seen leadership over the last almost half a century, what are your broad stroke observations on the political scenario currently, specifically the nature of leadership that we have at the helm of affairs today?
Well, I think it's beyond doubt that we have in Prime Minister Modi a very strong, determined leader. I don't think even his critics would deny that. The question is the quality of the politics that we're practicing. You know, we have a system whereby today we are becoming less and less secular, more majoritarian, sometimes outright communal. We have a system where often MPs or ministers, even on occasion, have taunted Muslims that go to Pakistan. We have a system whereby Muslims are othered, they're accused of love jihad. God knows what love jihad is. They're accused of cow lynching. They're often assaulted and they're frequently beaten up. That is something that didn't exist in the India that I knew when I was younger. It's now become prevalent and it's increasing. And I find that very sad. I find it very depressing.
Right. I mean, this kind of victimization or, otherization of Muslims has existed for a long time now. I'm not talking about the last 10 years. I mean, say, even for the last, say, 50 or even 75 years since independence. But there was always strong pushback from opposition forces. But is that lacking right now? Is the opposition really not pushing back? Have they also been kind of forced to toe the communal line, at least, every now and then? Is that something that's happening right now, in your opinion? And why is that?
I think the opposition is pushing back, and it often pushes back pretty effectively. Think of not just the Congress Party and Rahul Gandhi. Think of Mamata Banerjee. Think of the CPM, CPI. Think of Tamil Nadu parties like the DMK. Of course, they're pushing back. But you have a very strong BJP which dominates the center. It may not have the majority that it did up to 2024. It may have lost it, but it depends upon allies that are very subordinate to the party, very pliant and compliant and willing to support it. And you have ministers now, and you have a ruling party now, and you have a system surrounding the RSS now that trade on treating Muslims as others. Now it is becoming public policy as far as the RSS is concerned to keep calling India a Hindu country, but insist that it's only being said culturally. And truly, that I find very strange. We are not a Hindu country. We are a secular country. Constitutionally, we are a secular country. And to keep interpreting it as a Hindu country is to deny Christians, Jains, Buddhists, and Muslims, most of all, the right to a separate identity.
Right. Most worryingly, this kind of discourse has even entered educational institutions. A whole bunch of kids are learning this in schools, colleges, and it's kind of becoming kind of normal for them. It's the new normal almost. And they're going to now take over this India over the next decade or two. How then can we continue to maintain the nature of our secular republic?
By you and me and others like us insisting that we are Indian first, that our religion is a private matter. It is not part of our identity in any public sense. It may certainly be part of our private identity. It's very important to people that they are Hindu or Muslim or Christian, but they don't necessarily identify only in Hindu terms, just as Tamilians don't identify only in Tamil terms. We are a composite country with a composite identity, one strand of which is religion, but there are multiple other aspects to our identity, and we must keep emphasizing on that multiplicity.
Right. Do you think that will work, even though there seems to be great public support for taking on a very, very obvious Hindu identity in public and private life all across Twitter, and in other public places.
Because it's being presented to people as if their Hindu identity is in danger and under threat, and that's not the case. When it's said that the Muslims threaten us, that they're going to overwhelm us, that India will in due course become a Muslim country, that is complete poppycock and nonsense. The Muslims are, according to the 2011 census, which is the most recent census, we have barely 14.8 or 14.9% of the population, just a shade under 15. Hindus are 79% of the population. Not even in 1,000 years would that 14% dominate the 80%.
Okay. So what I'm getting from you is essentially the leaders are leading in a certain direction and the people are being led therefore. So a leader who chooses to lead in a different direction can effectively change things, with some difficulty perhaps, but can definitely effectively change the kind of discourse that we are seeing today. Am I right?
Powerful leaders in our country in the past have dominated the picture so strongly that their impact and imprint on us has been enormous. Think of Nehru, the Nehruvian years, the Nehruvian thinking, and the fact that right up till the mid-60s or 70s, we idolized the man. Think of Indira Gandhi and the power and authority she held. Think of how she was considered even by Atal Bihari Vajpayee as Empress Durga after the Bangladesh war. So important, powerful leaders can create an environment where they dominate and where they influence and where we, in a sense, are colored by them.
Right. So all hope is not lost yet, therefore.
I don't think hope is ever lost, because I think India is a much bigger country and a much more resilient country than most people believe, but there's no doubt that we are going through what would be a fairly sorry time at the moment because of the nature of the leadership. This is enhanced by the fact that they are also strong leaders, and their strength dominates us just as much as their opinions irritate me.
Right. But it's reassuring to hear from you that we have...
Sorry, could you repeat that? I missed the first word of your sentence.
I said it's reassuring to hear from you that all hope is definitely not lost, and things can change, and things can definitely change for the better. Now,
yes, we've been through bad patches in the past. Don't forget the emergency from 75 to 77. There was a period during the emergency in 76 when people believed we had lost democracy forever. But it returned, and it was the Indian people with the first opportunity that they got with the election of 1977 who restored our democracy and restored our faith in freedom of expression, the right to institutions that are independent of government, the right to think freely as we want, organize freely as we want, form parties as we want. All of that was given back to us by the Indian people in 77. I'm sure when the opportunity comes to them again, it may take a long time to happen, that they will give back to India the rights and privileges and freedoms that we cherish.
Right. We talked about elections, right, and how the Indian people voted very decisively in 1977 and in some sense, restored the democracy that had been taken away in 75 by the emergency. But with these Bihar elections, with the kind of skullduggery that we've observed, the kind of benefits that have been given to voters, the special intensive role revision that was undertaken, and so on, elections themselves seem to appear a lot dodgier than earlier. The question therefore is, free and fair elections, will they still continue to happen in India?
Well, free and fair elections in terms of people coming out and voting as they want do happen in India. Free and fair elections in the sense of oppositions occasionally, I'm underlining that word occasionally, defeating the government of the day has happened. We have opposition governments in power in Himachal, in Karnataka, in Telangana, in Kerala, in Punjab, right? But what is unfortunate is that we have now established a record. It began perhaps with Madhya Pradesh, it's happened again in Maharashtra, it's happened now in Bihar, where governments choose to reach out to people by giving them the offer of material benefits literally on the eve of the election, and that is a clear form of vote buying. I know that these welfare benefits do bring real benefit to the people who get them, But the fact that they are only offered 5 weeks, 6 weeks before the voting happens is a clear sign that you're actually luring people with the benefit you're giving to encourage them to vote. And if that continues, it will be almost impossible for oppositions to defeat incumbent governments, because incumbent governments are in charge of the treasury and can dole out the benefits. It's not that these benefits have been given for the 5 years that they were ruling. They were given literally on the eve of the voting as a way of saying to people, vote for us. This is what we can do. This is what we will do.
And in a country like ours, that is pretty much biasing the voters, right? I mean, many people are, hand to mouth on a monthly basis, and you transfer this huge tranche of funds to them. You're in effect telling them, vote for us, and we'll continue to do this.
Absolutely. And as I read in the papers in the state of Bihar, where the average monthly income is somewhere around 70,000, 10,000 is a huge amount of money to be given. And according to some calculations that I've read, which I'm assuming are correct, the total quantity of women who got it 1.3, 1.4 crore amounts to something like 65,000 per constituency, which means that's a very large number of people who you're attempting to lure, and many of them you did successfully lure to vote for you.
Right. Okay. I'm going to switch tracks now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the media, something that you have been part of pretty much your entire working life.
Now, my entire working life, in fact.
Your entire working life. So, my question to you is simple, right? All along, and even during the emergency, we had a tradition of very robust media, which was fearless, spoke truth to power. That piece has completely collapsed over the last decade or so, right? We have all these cheerleaders in both the print media as well as on the audiovisual media who seem to be doing the government's bidding. They're not actually asking questions of the government. In such a situation, how is the normal ordinary voter ever going to learn the truth? How is he going to understand what the government is doing wrong and therefore change his opinion about the government if the media is so supine?
There's an awful lot of truth, as you call it, that the Indian people are not made aware of by the media. The media either self-censors, or it is censored by its proprietors, or it is censored by the government, whichever three it is, I don't know. It can probably be all three at a time. But that information, that detail, that analysis is never given. Therefore, you find out through other means. You find out through social media, through WhatsApps and Instagrams, through YouTube, because that is still much freer, much more open, much more outspoken. But there are some newspapers that do give you the truth, to the extent that they're capable of doing. I'm talking of the Telegraph in Calcutta, I'm talking of the Hindu in South India, also in Delhi, I'm talking of the Indian Express. All three are newspapers that have strived very hard to uphold the higher standards. Sometimes they have fallen short of what they were attempting to do, I won't deny that, but quite often they haven't, they've succeeded. And so I, on a regular basis, read every single day the Hindu and the Indian Express, and I rely on those papers. I trust those papers. There's an awful lot that they tell me that I want to know, and which they manage to convey quite successfully. But sadly, even those papers often have to give columns to government ministers as a way of balancing. So you find that people like the former vice president has become a sort of regular columnist, or Ram Madhav has become a regular columnist of the Indian Express. Before 2014, there was no sign of such people writing regular columns for papers. Now, in the Indian Express, they write fairly regularly, but that may be the way the paper internally balances what it's doing, and if that is a requirement, fine, as long as we get good, credible, believable, critical news. I'm quite happy to read these people as columnists.
But the government has gone after, if not these two specific papers that you mentioned, but other independent media outlets like The Wire or, other important. Wire is a publication that you're associated with closely, and many others. In such a situation, how long can the media continue to kind of do this kind of reporting, investigative journalism, and so on, when, all the authorities are kind of literally bearing down on them with all the power that they can command?
The answer to your question will have to be a depressing one, which is that the The media will not be able to carry on like this for very long. And which is why increasingly television in India has become what's called Godi media. Increasingly several newspapers have become what is called Godi media. They've given in. They present the government line, or they write stories as if the government was the censor and they need to please the government censor. They don't really necessarily worry about analysis, good, solid, honest, objective reportage. They self-censor themselves. There are many papers where columnists who have been regular columnists of the paper have been told, please don't write this, we can't carry it.
So therefore then, in that sense, there is cause for concern. There is cause for worry. It's not all that hopeful, all that rosy, all that green.
There's great cause for concern. I don't think the Indian media is a shining example of what a media can and should be. There are a few exceptions, and I've identified those exceptions, but the vast majority is depressing.
Right.
Forgive me interrupting you, that's probably even more true of Indian news television.
Right. Yeah, of course. I mean, needless to say, I can't think of a single television channel that is trying to do, at least to some extent, what the Hindu or the Indian Express is doing in print, or what the Wire is doing in the digital journalism space. I mean,
I agree with you completely, Nogan. I can't think of a single channel that is one that would be worthy of regular daily watching. I can't think of a single one. Obviously, one's forced to watch them because you need to know what's happening, and to the extent to which they tell you, you will benefit. But they don't tell you reliably, they don't tell you honestly, they don't tell you with any criticism of the government, and they all go out of their way to attack the opposition. Never will you see similar criticisms or critiques of the government. They pillory Rahul Gandhi. They very rarely question Narendra Modi. In fact, during election time, Narendra Modi and Amit Shah's rallies, regardless of the fact that there are other important things happen, are shown live. You see channels cutting to the Prime Minister's rally or the Home Minister's rally, even though the channel may at that point in time be in the middle of a news bulletin, which would be considered sacrosanct, but they'll cut immediately to the Prime Minister or the Home Minister, and they'll ignore the fact that what they're hearing in that speech that is being carried live is something they've heard 3-4 times already.
Right. But as a journalist, you never shied away from asking tough questions of leaders. Now, there is your famous interview with our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which is now almost a meme now, the Dosti Bane Rahe statement. That is a popular internet meme now. What gave you the courage, or what gave you the gumption to kind of, brazen it out and ask them tough questions?
Karthik, it wasn't really a question of courage. It was simply my sense that I was doing the job that I was in a position to do. My job as a journalist is to ask questions. Sometimes those are tough questions. Sometimes they are questions that the guest I'm talking to doesn't want to answer. But when you have an audience watching you and you've asked a question, I think courtesy to the audience demands that you persist till you get an answer. Otherwise, the audience would have wasted their time listening to your interview, and they'll say to themselves, he asks questions, he doesn't bother about the answer, he doesn't get the answer, he doesn't persist, it's a waste of time, why watch him? So I think both my responsibility as a journalist as well as my responsibility to the audience means that if you ask a question, you must ensure you get an answer. And if you don't, after great persistence, get an answer, then you need to make your failure to get an answer the next question. Why aren't you answering? What is there about this question that you're embarrassed about or scared of or shy of? That, I think, is what you will find anchors doing on television channels abroad in the West. The BBC does it, CNN do it, Al Jazeera does it. It's our job to do it. So I don't think it is a question of courage. I wasn't saying to myself, I need to be bold, I need to strike out, I need to take a position. I was simply doing my job as I saw it needed to be done.
Right. And of course, Jayalalitha quite actually told you that, it wasn't a pleasure talking to you and refused to shake your hand. Did that almost seem like a badge of honor that you'd been really tough with her and that's why she was so cold to you at the end of your interview?
I don't want to exaggerate and say that it felt like a badge of honor, but certainly her behavior made it clear to the audience that she was upset and that she hadn't liked the interview, and that would have convinced the audience that this was a tough interview and a good interview. Therefore, in a sense, her behavior helped me because it brought forth from the audience the response that any journalist, any anchor would want to get. But to say that I thought of it as a badge of honor would be an exaggeration. It would be too much of a self-fulfilling pat on the back.
Right. Just one or two questions before we end.
Go ahead.
Your advice to young people today growing up in India. They are facing numerous challenges. The economy isn't doing great, even though the government wants us to believe that it is. There are plenty of other challenges. Our cities are increasingly becoming very, very difficult spaces to live in. Education has become extremely expensive because lots of the education has become privatized. Health is a challenge. Health, again, is another matter of privatization, which has made it so expensive. Given such dangers, and maybe 5 years ago, escaping abroad was an option, but this kind of jingoistic tendency now seems to be all over the world. You've seen instances of racism in UK, US, Australia, almost everywhere. So then, as to a young person growing up in India today, what would you advise him or her?
Let me limit myself to one particular aspect of your question. I think the most important thing for young people, particularly when they're of an age where they're being bombarded by different ideas, different suggestions, and they could, I'm not saying will, but could get swept off their feet by the thoughts and ideas that are being shot at them, is to say to yourself, what do I want to do? What matters to me? What would reflect me to the extent I understand myself best? And then stay true to that. It's very difficult when you're younger and less self-reflective to ask yourself those questions, but I think it's very important that you should try to do so. There are moments in all our lives when we're young when we have to face those choices which are critical choices. When you decide what to study at university, when you ask yourself where do you want to go to university, when you grow up and you start finding a partner and you decide whether you want to marry a particular girl or not, whether you are in love or whether this is just a passing infatuation. Those are moments when you reach deep into yourself to try and understand yourself. And I would say that reaching deep into your soul, so to speak, is a very important thing for people to do as often as they can. Try and understand yourself. Try and be true to yourself. Try and do the best of your ability as truthfully and honestly as you can. And you will find that actually things will work out. It's when we create false pretenses around us that we get trapped into image making. And then you become something that you're not, but you try very hard to be different to yourself. That's where you get into problems. So be true to yourself. That's what I would say. Be true to yourself and try and understand what is myself. What am I? What do I want? Why do I want it? And those, as I say, are difficult questions to ask when you're young. They're difficult questions to ask when you're my age. But they're questions that we need to continually keep asking ourselves.
So can I summarize it as saying you're telling young people to be authentic and be true to themselves?
Yes, absolutely, and you put it beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. I hope lots of people read this interview and are inspired to lead the kind of life that you have led. You've been a beacon of inspiration for many, including me. So thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you very much for all the kind things you said. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and I've enjoyed it greatly. Thank you very much indeed for making time to talk to me.
Thank you. Thank you for making time to talk to us.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you very much indeed.